Hello and welcome to the debate special transmission on the budget. This is something that has been much awaited and discussed at length in the previous days and months. There has been a lot of political instability and of course economic turmoil as well that the country and its people has faced, and so all eyes were on the federal budget that was unveiled today as to whether or not it's going to be able to provide the kind of relief to the people that they want and that they expect from this government as well. Whether or not that has actually happened or the government has been successful in providing the most relief that they could is of course something that we will be discussing in our show today, and then trying to analyze how it's going to impact the economic situation of the country, and considering the political scenario as well, how we're going to move forward, especially with reference to talks with the IMF, and then of course being able to gain the economic trajectory that we need in order to proceed in a positive direction. Some of the main key points of this budget, of course, when we look at it, have been with regards to whether or not the people in the country will be getting some relief. There was talk by Mufti Ismail earlier that the budget will not be able to provide relief to the middle class as much, but how this is going to play out in the long run would of course be seen. 10 billion has been allocated for the establishment of pension fund. We also know that there is much talk about a 15% increase in salaries of government employees as well, how that's going to impact the budget, and then of course the national exchequer will be of course under discussion. We have the economic growth rate fixed at 5%. The inflation rate is to be reduced to 11.5%. Tax to GDP ratio be taken to 9.2%. There was also talk earlier about how there needs to be an increased emphasis on direct tax, and whether or not we'll be able to see the kind of tax collection the government aims for also will be discussed in our show today. Imports also will be reduced from $76 billion to $70 billion. And then of course there is of course the issue of the total public debt also, and whether or not that is something that the government will be able to take care of. Other aspects of the federal budget, of course, will be discussed throughout the show, but the overall aim to take a closer look at this would be to understand how it's going to affect the people, the prices of essential items, the way that the economic situation is going to evolve, and how we're going to be able to play that out in the long run. For this and more, we're going to be joined by our analysts in the studio as well as online. As always, I have with me in the studio is Farrukh Pitafi, and we don't have Raja Faisal with us today, but we have a very special guest in the studio. We have Dr. Sajid Amin, who's Deputy Executive Director, SDPI. Thank you very much, Dr. Sajid Amin, for taking the time out and being a part of our debate in the studios. We've also been joined online by Rana Ehsan Afzal Khan, who's the leader PMLN, and by Zulfikar Ali Badr, leader PPP. So I'll welcome them as soon as they are part of the debate. Thank you very much, gentlemen, for being part of the debate. Before we move on to further discussion on the budget, Farrukh, an overview perhaps of the main ideas or highlights of the budget. When we look at it, there are of course so many figures that come out to play, but what should the people be looking out for? Any key points that stand out?
Right. First of all, Sana, it is important to underscore the fact that it is a difficult budget for difficult times. Remember that because of the economic situation and balance of payment crisis that we have gone through, and we still are going through, it was quite difficult, and especially in this environment of political turmoil where we just saw a new government taking over. By the way, this also has become a thing in Pakistan. Let's hope it doesn't, that partial terms, governments with partial terms actually give the budget, right? But when you talk about the overall outlay, it is 9.5 trillion rupees, which I was not expecting because there is a financial crunch at this moment. When you look at the fiscal deficit, that is at a whopping 5.1 trillion rupees. That is a huge number. And given that huge number, I would have thought that there's going to be some shrinkage in expenditure as well, but that didn't happen. But PSDP has faced a cut. It is down 19% from last year. Now it is somewhere around 700 billion rupees. So usually it is thought that such expenditures actually build the capacity of the economy to further progress. So at this moment, what I'm going to call it is a fiscal belt tightening budget. There's an attempt, but I don't know, because there is this target of taxes that amounts to 6 trillion rupees target. It is going to be uphill task, but if that is met, I think that the economy is going to find some even keel.
All right. Dr. Sajid, when you look at the overall federal budget that has been unveiled, of course, we understand that it was a difficult budget that has been put forward. And then there may be a lot of aspects that we may not agree with or not really think is better for the economy. And we'll come to those later as well. But if there are any key points that you think are positive about this budget, what would they be?
Well, thank you. I think one of the key positive point was that this was a noise-free budget.
Okay.
Finance Minister was very smoothly presenting this budget.
That no opposition?
Yeah, absolutely.
That is not really an ideal type.
Though. Yeah, but it's not ideal in a sense. This may be a missing point actually.
Yeah.
You know, the opposition is really a watchdog on the budget actually. Their proposals, their sort of follow-ups on the budget help improve the budget. So I think this was one thing that was missing actually on this budget. But overall, going on the budget, there was no surprise in budget actually. It is as per the expectations. Number one, it was expected that this will be a budget for fiscal consolidation, for stabilization of the economy, and that it is actually. Number two, it was that given the tenure that the government is having, this may be sort of, I mean, this is the kind of a new government coming in and presenting its budget. So there was a sort of, we were not expecting any long-term or medium-term solutions. So generally there is a short-term budget, and it is mainly focused on providing the relief to the common man, to the public at large, particularly the side effects of the tight fiscal policies that government is going to take, austerity cuts and something. So number one, number two, this was again as expected.
Right.
But there are certain sort of kind of key concern areas as well. For example, I see the target of inflation sort of is very underestimated, for example. I mean, it is 11.5%, when almost every expert you talk to is sort of expecting a budget beyond 15%. And particularly when the kind of budget layout it is, the fiscal sort of the relief packages are there, social protection is increased, BISP is increased. So there will, and particularly if you go on the petroleum development levies, as IMF is asking, there will be a further pressure on inflation. So this was sort of a surprise to me that this is underestimated. Number two, I think similarly the target of revenue target, that is more than 7 trillion coming from the tax revenues, that will be difficult to achieve because the other way we are suggesting that we will be sort of slowing down the economy, we will be cutting the economy down, particularly the imports down. And this is really interesting that around 52% of our taxes, they mostly come from the import at the, so when we are curbing the imports, there will be a cut down, I mean the tax revenues from there. So it
and
will
Dr.
be
Sab, this revised growth target of 5%, where the idea is that if you go beyond 6%, it actually increases our balance of payment, particularly our trade deficit increases. So that also is an interesting aspect of it.
I think that is overestimated again, overset target. The experts believe that if you really wanted to cool down economy and the kind of the measures that you are proposing are taking actually, you may fall between 3 to 4% of GDP target. 5% will be difficult to achieve if this budget is any guide.
All right. We also have with us Rana Ihsan Afzal Khan, and I want to talk to him about these targets as well because, of course, as we're discussing, it may perhaps seem to be a bit over ambitious. Do you think that you'd agree with that, or do you think that perhaps this was a necessary thing to put in place, such targets perhaps to appease the public in one way or the other, or to perhaps set a target so that we would be able to achieve something out of it? Do you, first of all, agree whether or not the targets are overambitious, and could you be able to achieve them?
I think this budget is not an expansionary budget. It is a budget to consolidate the economy and to cool things down. And we've seen that, we have planned to bring the fiscal deficit down from 8.5% to below 5% of GDP. We want fiscal discipline, and we're doing that by, we're talking about the tax target, which is almost 7 trillion. It is 20% higher than last year's collection. I think it is achievable. It is not going overboard because you're targeting 5% growth and you're targeting 11.5% of inflation. So, that makes you increase the target by 4%, and that can be done by better enforcement. It is an achievable target that can be achieved by, the tax measures that we've taken. We've tried to make sure that the tax burden that we've added this year is not going to be focused on the people who cannot afford it. Rather, it is going to be focused on people who are supposed to be paying taxes, who have higher income. And I believe that this budget has focused that the burden should not be on the salaried class. We have given relief to the salaried class. The income tax limit has been raised from 6 lakhs to 12 lakhs. So I think that is a big plus for the salaried people. Similarly, the people who work for the government, we've made sure that we give them a good increase. That is a 15% jump in their income, so they can take care of their monthly budget and they do not face a lot of inflation. So overall, I think we feel that the current account deficit needs to be controlled. We've targeted 2% of GDP. We feel that we will be able to bring imports down to $70 billion, and then we feel that the target set for export is also achievable. The tax to GDP we think is going to increase to 9.2%. All of this is achievable, and we will be working hard
Right.
towards
Dr.
achieving
Saab,
these targets.
sorry, Rana Saab, let me ask you another thing. Earlier you were saying that there's been a relief to the salaried class. I understand that the slab has been increased for the exemption, and there's 15% salary increase as well. But this slab that you have increased from 6 lakh to 12 lakh rupees, that essentially actually targets the lower middle class or lower classes, right? But it seems that the class that is coming under all the heat is basically the middle class, and especially the working class in the middle class. What are you doing for that?
Well, you see, the current situation of the country to allow as much as we've offered, as much as we wanted that there should be relief for everyone, but that's not possible in the current scenario. We to target the people who are the most impacted by inflation, and that I think has been the target, and we feel that it is going to be achieved. But overall, I think it is a good budget. It's a budget which is focused on taxing the rich versus putting that burden towards the lower
All right. Let's
income
also
class.
take Mr. Zulfikar's opinion on this as well. Of course, there was this intention of providing the best possible budget and giving the maximum relief to the masses. And I understand, of course, that there may be certain aspects of it which you were not able to fulfill, or that everybody would not have been able to be satisfied. But overall, do you think that this is the best possible budget that the government could present, and this is the maximum relief that could have been given to the people?
Badr Sahab.
Bismillah ar-Rahman ar-Rahim. Thank you very much. I have heard all the comments. I think my personal view about this budget is this is a balanced budget, and I would agree with what the anchor person has said, that this is the best possible budget we could have offered in this shortest time span after becoming.
He's agreeing with your question.
After coming.
Right. Okay.
Yeah, I'm agreeing with the questions you have raised. I think this is the best possible budget that we could have, managed to give relief to the people. One thing is, it's not the budget that I personally wanted to hear, but still we don't have a choice. So this is the best thing that we could.
Badr Sahab, can you elaborate what kind of budget you wanted to hear?
My budget wishes are different because I belong to a middle class, and I wanted that the relief should be given to the people who are actually taxpayers in the country. In my personal opinion, there are very less, about 1% of the people, and most of them are salaried class people who are being paid after, deducting their tax. So they should be given a relief. All the people who are actually the taxpayers or filers in this country, they should be given some competitive advantage over others, where others are not paying the taxes and they are paying for the last so many years. The number of taxpayers or the tax that is not being increased. The tax net is still there. So the numbers cannot be, increased
Yeah,
during the last few
yeah,
regimes.
and I
Unfortunately, it's not that it's our regime or it's someone else government,
right,
but
absolutely.
unfortunately,
Badar Sahab, when you
all the
called it,
governments have been, yeah.
of course, Badar Sahab, when you called it a balanced budget, there's also a concern about balancing the books. When you're looking at the deficit amounting to 5.1 trillion rupees, how do you suggest, how do you recommend that we balance the books then?
Sir, it's a difficult proposition. It's, I mean, I am not an accountant. I am a lawyer and I am a general practitioner who works in a service sector. And I have been paying tax since I was turned 18. And every year the amount of tax that has been increased from my side. But during the last year or so and during this time, I think it's difficult for the government as well to balance the books as well. So uh, my concern is, as a general commoner person, that government should have given more relief to the people who are paying. And the one thing which government should have taken, and unfortunately none of the governments during the last few years have taken any steps in order to bring all the stakeholders on board and take those steps which can help the government in order to increase the tax net. One thing they have done in this budget, that they have offered a fixed net on the small retailers. So some kind of proposition should be given to the mid-size SMEs, to the new startups, to the big size, like not the big size, but a little smaller than the big size, who are like, in the business for the last few years, who are growing and who are giving, opportunities of employment to the new people. So they should have been, brought in, and some kind of policy should have been given for them as
Right,
well.
All right.
Another thing, yeah, please.
Right.
right.
Dr.
So
Sajid, you had a question?
my
Dr. Sahab, you have a
my
question or a
my
comment?
yeah, please.
I have just a quick question. I mean, from any of the two can respond. I mean, I have been discussing the budget with some friends, and generally there is a concern that on some of the sort of tax exemptions and tax holidays, IMF may raise some concerns. Was there any consultation with IMF, for example, the sort of tax exemption to agriculture sector and the tax holidays to the film industry? Was there a discussion with the IMF on this one? Number one. And number two, I couldn't see anything particularly on SMEs. What is there for SMEs in this budget? Maybe I have missed something.
Rana Ehsan Afzal Sahab, could you
And also,
please?
Rana Sahab, whether or not the overall budget you think will pave the way for the IMF bailout package as well?
The tax target was discussed with the IMF, and there was agreement that it is going to be 7 trillion for FBR, and so was the fiscal deficit, which is going to be 3.9 trillion for this coming year. It was 5.1 trillion for the current financial year, and for the coming is going to be 3.9 trillion rupees. So yes, there was discussion about the fiscal deficit, the current account deficit, and our tax revenues. So we feel that the staff level meeting coming in the few next weeks is going to be a final meeting, and there's going to be success on it. And about the subsidies that we're giving were discussed, and we feel that it's going to work.
So Rana Sahab,
And
what you're saying is that the IMF will not be having any objections with any aspect of this budget.
Yes, we're showing fiscal discipline. We're bringing it down to 5%, the fiscal deficit. We're controlling our expenditures. We're going to control the current account deficit as well. This is not an expansionary budget. The PSDP has been reduced. It has been brought down to 800 billion. So all these factors are shows a responsible government, shows a government which is going to control the fissures or the holes that existed, and all of this is going to be done done in this year, hopefully, and we will be achieving our